Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to Dig on America, where we speak truth to power. Every week, we give you the dig on how American history, policies, and media created the social and political issues we face today. DOA is independent media supported by listeners, but they'll tell you we're just fake news, deep state propaganda, funded by George Soros, the Clinton Foundation, BLM Marxists, and
Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica.
Wow.
Dirk Benedict.
Ooh.
I would say Starbuck from Moby Dick.
Oh, it's a battle of the
Starbuck, Moby
Starbuck.
Dick? Okay, I'm going
Mr.
Mumra.
Mumra.
Ooh, I changed my mind to Emotep. No, I changed my mind to Moon Knight.
Emotep.
Oh,
Emotep.
Yo, when my man faked like he was a zombie, that was the best. That's what I knew. That
Emma was like,
that movie.
Emma was like, oh, yeah, no. I was like, that is the blackest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. He was like, I'm getting out of this. Fuck that.
My man seen the horde coming, and he was like, oh, no. I'm with y'all. Come on.
He went zombie real quick.
he went zombified. Well, welcome back to Dig on America, episode 99.
Part 2. Or 1.
Oh yeah, you know what? Okay, I just decided what I'm going to do with that though. So, this be episode 99. Episode 101 which will be posted in a couple days after this one is posted, will be the first half of this show with Amber Rose Washington, our awesome esteemed guest and hopefully future network contributor, because we're going to keep pounding her until she joins us.
Word choices.
Problematic.
Word choices.
I will pop the. That problem is so white it could go snowboarding. Quote Charles Barkley.
You know we're gonna have to start doing highs. We're gonna have to start playing the Kenny and Shaq role. And be like, what do you say?
Oh, okay. Hold on. No. You want some bullshit? No, because when it comes to tongue-in-cheek moments and the misogyny, this person upstairs from me wins the contest every time. If you want Shauna, so fuck you.
No, you're fuck Dutch. You're Charles Barkley. Haas, you're Diesel, and I'm Kenny the Jet. That's clearly what it is.
Benny and the Jets. All right, so welcome back to Dig on America again, episode 99. We will see you guys for our 100th episode next week, where we talk about the 100th show, and then we're going to have TJ and Matt Delhauer on the show next week, because it will be on May 4th that we talk about that. So we're going to have a little bit of fun next week. We're not going to talk about anything super serious. We'll go over some of the politics of Star Wars because it's Star Wars Day, and it's just going to be a fun, laid-back show for our 100th show.
I'm not wearing a shirt,
and I'm not wearing any clothes at all.
I'm not
next
wear
week.
any bottoms.
But this week we have Amber Rose Washington, again, our awesome friend, Big Hoss, Mikey, and myself, and we're going to do a dig today. And this week's dig is going to be on autism, because it is Autism Awareness Month. That's why I'm going to make this 99, because it's still April. But I did want to ask you guys real quick. So Elon Musk, we talked about this real briefly in the first show. Elon Musk is buying Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So my question for you guys is a couple of questions. Number one, do you guys think that Elon Musk is going to change anything meaningful about Twitter? Number one. And number two, do you think that he will reinstate Trump? And if so, will Trump come back? I'm just curious as to your thoughts. And if even maybe it doesn't even matter. Big Hoss, what do you think?
Okay.
He'll make some change to make it kind of splashy. But I think the biggest change is he's talking about charging a subscription fee, which I think is going to just drive people off of Twitter. I mean,
he did talk. I didn't see that he's going to charge a fee.
He talked about he kind of alluded to that might be one of the changes he'd make, and I think that. Okay, fine. Number one, young people aren't really on Twitter as much anymore anyway. and this is going to solidify for them. And then people like me, who I'm not on Twitter too much, but I'm definitely not going to pay for it. And he might bring Trump back. He might bring him back. And
Trump said he
why?
doesn't want to come back. Did you see that?
Yeah. I don't believe that though.
Baloney.
He's going to pass up an opportunity to
he won't
speak his limited peanut brain.
He's been. You know how many truths he's posted on Truth Social?
Oh my God.
You know how many times he's we'll call it a tweet because that's, how many times he's posted or tweeted, or they call them truths on Truth Social in 3 months. One.
Yeah, the day it came out.
Yeah. The day it launched, he said, "Get ready for big things. Your favorite president is back," and has not truthed since then or ever before, for that matter. Amber, what are your thoughts on the new Muskverse?
I'm worried, and I'll tell you why I'm worried. Because whenever you have someone that rich that could end homelessness just based on what he makes an hour. I think he makes $23 million an hour is the average right now.
That's the union rate right now. Yeah.
This is a man that had a discussion with the media several years ago where he said, he would like to see that happen. And he's not ended homelessness or any of these things. And instead he goes out and uses his wealth to buy Twitter so that it can be an open platform. Now there's a distinction between free press and free speech, and there's with that comes a great responsibility to be able to put forward the truth, because once you no longer know the truth, you no longer have the tenets of supporting a democracy, because nobody knows who to trust or what is the truth anymore. Once you do that and have everybody running in their own corners confused, it's an easy take, as we're seeing right now. So I really have strong reservations about him doing it, because he was an individual that when people were against things he said, he would block them. So I don't understand the dichotomy going on here where he says we need to open it up to everybody, but at the same time, he's blocking people left and right that disagree with his value system and the way he's performing his science.
I want to push back on that because those
I lost you. You have no audio.
Oh, come on, Mikey. You're supposed to be the producer of the show.
And I unplugged it. My bad.
Now he's back.
Yeah. So
he's so wild with his swinging his arms around.
I had to pull this down because I have a new chair. Anyway. I will push back because having people banned is not the same thing as blocking people. Those aren't the same. It's not free speech. If Dutch is constantly harassing my page and I'm sick of seeing it, I'm gonna block him.
I love doing that.
Like I'm not removing his right to free speech to harass me. He doesn't have a right to harass me. And if I want to block him so I don't see it anymore, he can continue to post whatever he wants, but I don't have to see it.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair what you just said.
Because if he uses Twitter like his personal one, and then every time somebody pisses him off, he just bans them, then yeah, I would go with you. But for him to block people on his personal page, I mean, I don't have anybody blocked, but there's a lot of things I don't click on intentionally so that doesn't get in my algorithm, so I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Well, let's answer this question. Let's get very serious. I know there's certain words that we can't say anywhere anymore, and for good reason. Right. But let's say a bunch of people decide, since it's a free-for-all now and nobody's getting banned, and they start coming up in your face or somewhere else, and they start, being blatant, let's just say blatant white supremacists. Right. And they believe in unbelievably, we were still allowed to have lynchings in the United States up until this year, which was abominable. It was crazy. I can't believe that was even still a thing.
They're going to keep doing it too.
What in the world is stopping those types of people from getting louder and louder and recruiting more and more people to their delusion about things that we've already settled in society, especially when it comes to that, when it comes to people that are trans, people that are gay. Look at biologists. Biologists have found 1,500 species of animals, including the African lion, that have gay traits, right? So gay is actually natural in all of nature, but yet you look at these people and they say it's unnatural. How do we stop misinformation? And worse yet, worse than misinformation is disinformation. How do we stop disinformation? Because we as a society have a responsibility to put forward stuff that is provable and objective.
Right. So I don't think we can both have free speech and say cutting it off at the source is the option, right? Because then we won't know what they're saying until after they say it. So it becomes this kind of catch-22 thing. But the best thing, and my real dad, Neil deGrasse Tyson, said this, you have to inoculate the children with knowledge.
Yes.
Like, so if our kids are well taught, they don't fall for this shit in the first place. And then the people look like absolute assholes like they already are. They just look stupid. It's like, no. Like if a flat earther came up to a kid in 7th grade, the 7th grader is going to laugh him out of the room.
But that's basing it on an assumption from today. Like if we go forward 4 years from now, let's say the Republicans take the presidency and the Congress. Now we have Republican held Senate, Congress, presidency, and the Supreme Court. All 3 branches of the government are covered by them. We get more and more laws like DeSantis and Mississippi and Texas and Utah and Arizona, and the list goes on, where they are not just talking about LGBT issues. They're talking about the Bible in the schools. They're talking about dress codes. They're talking about boys can only have this length of hair. They're talking about really sick stuff that changes the whole dynamic of our social construct.
Right.
What do we do there? Because the kids aren't going to know any better, because they've already been indoctrinated by these people that have this old-fashioned idea of how humanity works, and we all know that's just way in the past.
Oddly enough, I think the kids are winning.
Right now they are. But that's why that's why right now we're seeing a change in the dynamic, and there is now 34 states lined up to pass all these measures against children to stop them from learning certain things in books, including, what they're calling it is critical race theory. What we're calling it is, well, listen, we didn't come over here to the bountiful and just live in America. We actually conquered a people, right?
Yeah, AAH.
Yeah,
not CRT. Actual American history is, and that's what this whole podcast.
So how do we stop that with so many states buying into this nonsense, where young children from a very young age are going to start not knowing that some kids have gay parents, that indeed we did kill millions of Indians. We took over. We conquered a land just like every other civilization on the planet. The only reason any civilization or any country exists is because at one point in time they conquered that land. We did no different. We did no different, and we along the way created these documents that we never lived up to. We make kids do the Pledge of Allegiance, and yet the last part of the Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all, has never held true. It's never rang true in America. But yet kids today know less about American government than they did when I was in school in the 80s. So how do we fix this so I'm pushing back on you a little, which is, I don't think it's as simple as you're trying to make it be, because they're trying to change the narrative right from kindergarten.
Look at him squirm.
I was letting her finish something you know nothing
He's
about.
He's very polite.
Dutch.
I love that about him.
I was making sure she got her last word out.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Jeez. You see what I got to do with? You can't. Now you're here every week. Now
bring it, bitch. Come on.
So essentially what we're based with here is the last right-wing phenomenon, which is these fucking school board meetings. And that's the only way that stuff gets changed. And we've said it here often. Your local elections are fucking important.
Yeah.
Who's on your city board? Who's on your fucking school board? Like all these fucking little ticky tick things down at the bottom of the ballot is important. So if you're only voting 4 times or every 4 years, you are missing out on some things, and you need to know who's in charge of this shit, because that's so if you don't want your kids learning AAH and you want them to learn some fucking bullshit, then you better they're already getting their asses up there to fucking change things so that their kids can be as stupid as possible and be as behind the other countries as possible. But it's kind of for anybody who has a mind for these things, it's your job to make sure that you know, and you let everybody around you know, who is in office, who needs to be in office, who's running, who's a good candidate, who sucks, like that stuff's even if you don't have kids, that stuff's important, because those are going to be your employees, those are going to be your neighbors, it's going to be your citizenry, that's going to be your neighbor, that's your countrymen. And just because they're little now doesn't mean they're going to be little long. Like before the show got started, me and Amber were talking about 9/11. And it's 21 fucking years. Yeah. But it still feels 5 years ago.
Yeah, it does.
So in 21 years from now, it'll feel like 5 years or 5 years from now. And then there will be an entire generation of kids ready to fucking go. And they got their feet on the gas, ready to get this thing going.
At what point do we start hearing 9/11 was so long ago? Why do we still talk about it?
Well, we'll never forget about that, because that's the only way we can excuse our military occupation of 2 countries.
And believe me, I'm not saying that as a dig on anything to do with 9/11. I just find it interesting because people say, "Oh, well, you know, civil rights, slavery, Jim Crow was so long ago." You know, those people who say that will never, ever in their entire lifetime say that about 9/11, and it's hypocrisy.
And then I will counter a lot of times with, you talk about things being so long ago, but meanwhile, in the last 5 years, Bank of America, Fifth Third Bank, Wells Fargo, Chase have paid multi-million-dollar fines for charging Black and brown folk with the same credit and financial history as white people, higher interest rates on mortgages and auto loans.
Yeah, but that was 5 years ago. That was so long ago.
I was
you're
right.
Yeah, that long.
Yeah. I mean, come on, stop worrying about what happened in the past. All right, I'm gonna push the show real quick forward. I got one more quick thing to talk about. We'll spend 2 minutes on this, then we'll do the dig, and then we'll get to the humidor, and we'll go home.
Wait.
All right. So
it's more than 2 minutes.
In the last couple of days, U.S. Marine veteran Trevor Reed was released from prison in Russia in a prisoner swap. So.
What about
hold, don't get ahead of the story, Big Haas. Okay. So
WNBA star.
Yeah, never mind.
Oh God.
Never mind.
No, I see where you're going. Do it anyway.
Anyway, so the Biden administration and the family of Trevor Reed say the U.S. Marine veteran is on his way home. He was detained in 2019 for assaulting a police officer in Moscow, allegedly. Of course, it didn't happen in this country, so we use allegedly.
That allegedly on there.
Reed says that he doesn't remember the night events of that night because he was drunk, and his family has accused Russian officials of fabricating the charge. But anyway, he's on his way home, and that's good. On the other hand, Brittany Griner, WNBA star, Haas, why don't you tell us?
She's still in the clink.
Yeah.
Where?
The clink.
In what country?
Russia.
And has not yet been prisoner exchanged at all. And she was arrested not for beating up a police officer, but for what?
They said she had some weed and some weed pens.
Oh, and by the way, the person who Reed was exchanged for, I'll get you the guy's name here. It was Konstantin, so he has heavenly powers. Yaroshenko. Yaroshenko was sentenced in the U.S., and he is a Russian, in 2011 to 20 years in prison for conspiring to import $100 million worth of cocaine into the United States.
Damn, my man, you got caught with a whole
100. Wait, say that number again.
$100 million worth of cocaine.
Yeah.
God.
And
Damn, that's a lot of snow.
And his sentence, let's repeat that, was 20 years. I know brothers that got 20 years for an ounce.
I know people that got 20 years for freaking weed.
Go back to the Brittany Griner story, because I think there's more to it than just, she had drug charges. I think they're holding her because Russia is one of the biggest countries that is anti-LGBT, and she's gay. And I think that has a huge thing to do.
Her playing on their basketball team, though.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
I bet they'll let her out if she.
Oh, that's.
I bet if she renounces her citizenship and she says she'll play for the Russia team, I bet they let her out. She might even be the best player on the men's team.
Yeah, she's really good.
How would those trans rights people feel about that?
She's a center, right? She's like 6'10".
Oh yeah,
she's 6'11", I think.
That's why it's a fallacy. We won't get back into the trans athlete stuff, but the whole thing is a fallacy.
No, but I found it to be an interesting story. Okay, so let's get into today's dig, as Mikey puts the graphico up on el screeno.
I'm doing it.
So why am I talking about this? Here's my shirt, Captain Autism. That is me. This will be a little bit personal for me. It's probably a little shorter than most, but hopefully it brings up some good discussion. Now, my 8th grade social studies teacher,
Mr. Humble, taught
me things that turns out, after doing my own research, wasn't exactly the whole story. And this week we will dive into the topic of autism in honor of April being Autism Acceptance Month. According to Oxford, autism is a developmental disorder of variable severity that is characterized by difficulty in social interaction and communication, and by restricted or repetitive patterns of thought and behavior. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD, is considered a neurological developmental disability with symptoms being measured on a spectrum from subtle and mild to severe cognitive and developmental delays. Lastly, the American Psychiatric Association, according to them,
why did you say it like that?
I have no idea why I said it that way.
I'm like, this is a serious topic, so I won't make any
this topic is more or less free of dad jokes, so I'm trying to keep it light. But according to the APA, ASD is a complex developmental condition involving persistent challenges with social communication, restricted interests, and repetitive behavior. While autism is considered a lifelong disorder, the degree of impairment in functioning is because of these challenges varies between individuals with autism. So there's a huge, that's one of the things to know in this, is there's a huge spectrum here. What's true of one is not necessarily true of the other. We talked about you'll see it in the next a couple episodes from now when we post the audio, or in our other YouTube video with Amber. There's a lot of intersection here with what we talked about with incongruency. So the term autism, we'll do a little bit of history first, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes. The term autism was first used by psychiatrist Eugene Bleuer in 1908. He used it to describe a schizophrenic patient who had withdrawn into his own world. The Greek word autos meant self, and the word autism was used by Bleuer to mean morbid self-admiration and withdrawal within self. This definition has become antiquated and is no longer specifically associated with people with ASD. The pioneers in research into autism were Hans Asperger and Leo Kanner, who were working separately in the 1940s. Asperger described very able children, while Kanner described children who were severely affected. So we'll get into those differences in a minute. Their views remain useful for physicians for the next 3 decades. So here's the timeline. In 1943, Leo Kanner studied 11 children who had difficulties in social interactions. They had difficulties in adapting to changes in routines. They had good memories. They were sensitive to stimulus, especially light and sound. They showed really good intellectual potential. but they also displayed a propensity to repeat the words of a speaker rather than engage in a conversation. And lastly, they had difficulties in spontaneous activity. This is all the things that Kanner cataloged. In 1944, Hans Asperger, again working separately, studied a group of children who resembled Kanner's description. Asperger's syndrome was named for him, and we'll go into what he said a bit later. Bruno Bettelheim,
We don't talk about Bruno.
who is probably from the Norse religion, studied the effect of a whole 3 therapy sessions. So the guy did three whole therapy sessions with children that he called autistic. Bruno claimed that the problem in the children was due to the coldness of their mothers, and thus separated the children from their parents. Kanner also, along with Bruno Bettelheim, both worked towards a hypothesis that showed that autistic children always would have frigid mothers. No sexism there. Bernard Rimland was a psychologist and parent of a child with autism. He disagreed with old Bruno that the cause of his son's autism was due to his wife's parenting skills. And I agree with Bernard. Autism came to be much better known, however, in the 1970s. The Erica Foundation started education and therapy for children by 1980, as many parents still confuse autism with, quote, mental retardation and psychosis. We'll get to the term retardation also. It was in 1980 that Asperger's work was finally translated to English and published, and it became basically common knowledge at that point. And when it became common knowledge in the 1980s, that's when the research on autism started to gain a lot more momentum. So before that, it was kind of in the background. It was increasingly believed by this point that parenting had no role in causation, and rather people started to blame more genetic ailments. A guy named Ole Ivar Lovas achieved limited success by implementing treatment at home, and he called this therapy time. So what they would do is they would basically spend about 40 hours per week with each child and sort of give them an in-home occupational learning therapy. And this is interesting because this is what my son goes through right now today with Easter seals. So this is really the infancy of that in the 1990s. So there's your timeline. Mikey likes timelines. I know they're not the most fun thing to listen to, but for some reason, Mikey adores them. So
I have my hang-ups and I'm okay with them.
Yes, you are. And again, anyone who wants to pause me can do so. Probably definitely over halfway with this one already. So it's like I said, it's a little bit quicker. So what do we know today? Well, we don't. We don't know everything, and we are learning more daily from the unique story of each unique autistic person. Autism is a highly variable neurodevelopmental disorder whose symptoms first appeared late during infancy up until about 3 years old. Autistic people may be severely impacted in some respect, but average or even superior in others. Autistic children often do not smile, and they look at each other's and they look at the other person they're engaged with in conversation less often. They may not respond to their name. They may have less eye contact and not know how to take turns. And they don't use simple movements to express themselves, like pointing at things or asking for things. However, they do form very, very deep attachments to their caregivers. In essence, they learn to communicate differently, almost like speaking another language. Autism may be associated with a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Risk factors during pregnancy include certain infections, such as rubella, toxins, including valproic acid, which I haven't heard of this before, so it's VALPROIC acid, alcohol use, cocaine, pesticides, lead poisoning, air pollution, fetal growth restriction, and autoimmune diseases. Some controversies surround the topic of autism when it comes to some of the proposed environmental causes. Most notably of this would be the debate around formula, and more so the debate about the vaccine hypothesis, which, although disproven, continues to hold a lot of sway in certain communities, and during COVID blew the hell up. Autism affects information processing in the brain and how nerve cells and their synapses connect and organize. But how this occurs is not super well understood yet. Several interventions have been shown to reduce symptoms. Skill-building interventions and structured plans are useful. Therapy today aims to reduce challenging behaviors and build upon individual strengths. And this has created an autistic culture to develop within our society. Now, in this culture, some individuals believe, and this kind of goes back to kind of like what Amber was talking about in the other episode, is some people are looking for a cure for it, and other people are just saying, hey, let's accept it as a difference and accommodate it instead of cure it. So there's two really opposing autistic cultures there. Globally, autism is estimated to affect 25 million people. 20 years ago, the number of autistic people was estimated at 0.7%, but today it's about 1.5% of children that are diagnosed with ASD. The number of people diagnosed, this increase of people diagnosed, I should say, may be partly due to increased recognition of the condition. It's diagnosed 4 to 5 times more often in boys than it is in girls.
Right.
So those are the facts. And now I get to the more anecdotal part. So how do we help? Some of this is from me and some of this is from psychologists. So first of all, we want to recognize the signs. We want to make an attempt to be understanding. Children with ASD have trouble relating to other people. They have trouble making eye contact. They often withdraw into themselves. They may seem uninterested in relating to you, but it's not about you, like Mikey said before. It's not their fault. It's not their parents' fault. It's not at all proven to be a vaccine's fault. By the way, we know this because we have data, and there's no significant difference in the diagnosis of autism between groups of vaccinated and unvaccinated kids.
Shocker.
If there was, I'd say, personally,
you got studies and statistics, dude.
Yeah.
What?
Secondarily, it's not a mother's fault if they can't breastfeed.
What?
Now, hold on a second.
Dude, man, I don't know, man. Because my brother's sister's cousin's girlfriend's daughter told me.
That's what they told me too.
Saw you in the movies the other day, hugged up with some Taram.
My father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate told me.
Yo, my best friend's dog saw the whole thing.
What science
surgery in the vaccines was getting in people's DNA.
Yes,
one thing you said that was very prominent was that boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism. And sometimes it helps to get rid of the statistical number and put an actual number in there, which is 1 in 27 boys identified with autism, whereas 1 in 116 girls. That's a big difference. And it sort of like puts an explanation point on that. I find that very interesting.
Yeah. And just on that note, you mentioned before, but I will bring this up. People who do not identify with the sex they were assigned at birth are 3 to 6 times as likely to be autistic as cisgender people.
Correct.
Gender diverse people are also more likely to report autism traits and to suspect that they have undiagnosed autism, which is also very sad. But as far as like the mothers go, like, and this is one of the things, like, because if you remember early in the dig, they were talking about blaming, oh, your mother's cold, so therefore you're autistic in the 60s and 70s. So now what scientists are comfortable with concluding on this is that there's a correlation between formula feeding, little to no breastfeeding, and an increased risk in autism. So yes, there is a link between formula feeding and autism, but formula feeding does not cause autism, right? Mm-hmm. It's more of the lack of breastfeeding from time to time, and a lot of women are becoming engorged. Though that is not to say that breastfeeding your child means that they will not have autism. You're just talking about increased risk. The first year of Autism Acceptance Month was 1972, started by the Autism Society. And Autism Acceptance Month, which we're in now, April, emphasizes the need for public awareness to promote the acceptance, celebrate the differences, and be more inclusive towards autistic individuals around us. So remember, when you meet a child or an adult with autism, it is on you, not them, to be understanding. They have a special need, so you need to be patient with them. You need to be persistent, but you need to be soft. You need to use specific keywords and repeat them and stress them if necessary. You need to pause between words and phrases to give this person time to process what you've said. And you need to give them a chance to think of a response. Don't use too many questions and use big words and use less and try to use less nonverbal communication, right? Most importantly, always stay positive. Interaction through physical activity is very, very key. When dealing with autistic children specifically, be affectionate and be respectful. You have to show your love and your interest in this person. Remove the fucking word retarded from your fucking vocabulary. Okay?
Yeah.
Retarded should only be used in context of a machine, something used to slow down a machine working.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, it doesn't need to be used.
It's in music too.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, so yeah, I guess you get that pass.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you treat
Classical music.
No, I'm a songwriter, and I've used music that retards as you.
But you're classically trained. No dude sitting around with his fucking guitar is gonna be like, oh, and then I'll put a polka retard right here. No, you're not, and it's R-I, not R-E. They're not. I get you're trying to give them an out. I'm closing that door.
Well, and this is my last closing sentence here is this, and then I'll let you guys kind of chime in. And I'll probably have some anecdotal stuff to talk about here, but the main thing is that we need to, whether we come across a child, especially a child, or an adult who's autistic, like I believe our listener Bill Phil DePon Lamond has mentioned that he's autistic. If I'm remembering correctly, I incorrectly, I apologize. But we treat you like a fucking human. Accept them. And there's a really great book, and the book is called The Reason I Jump. And I read this book, and I swear, I listened to the audiobook, and I swear, I was in fucking tears the whole time. And one of the things is people say, they're like, well, because again, there's a spectrum, right? So some people are able to have these conversations where you're like, hey, don't you wish that you wouldn't have to go through this? And a lot of autistic people are like, I only know this. So I'm not sure that I would want to be different than what I am. And we need to recognize that these kids, there's nothing in the world more sweet and loving than an autistic person. There's nothing. And I feel bad because myself, I used to use the R word. I didn't care so much about this stuff because I thought, hey, you know what? I'm in good health. I eat good. Wife eats good. You know what I mean? We do the right things. We go to the right medical, the doctor's appointments on time. We get all the prenatal vitamins and all this type of stuff. And then you get affected with something, and then you're like, what a fucking asshole I've been about this. Even by not being engaged and not trying to understand. I can't even say honestly that if this hadn't happened, that I would still be any more than casually interested, and it's a tough one because I view myself as somebody who likes to be engaged in social causes and for like civil rights and shit, right? So it's like, but you don't always think of sometimes you miss them. Like I've missed them with trans. I missed them for a lot of years, and I missed autism and other developmental disorders for a lot of years. And I have to do that. Like I apologize to basically the world for that because I didn't know any better, right? And but I think that the main point is that like there's nothing that gets to your soul more than having a child. Like it is the world's greatest joy to be my son's dad. At the same time that it is also a classic, pain in the ass, right?
Still a kid.
Yeah, it not only is he 5, but like, try going through the airport with an autistic kid and looking at the reactions from people, jumping up and down. Like I talked about on the plane before, the wife had an issue on the plane, and like I think that our government has, like, especially with the mask mandate, and this is not a statement against the mask mandate at all, even though it's over now, but probably shouldn't be. But the point is, like, we can't pretend that an autistic person who is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old should still be held to the same rules as a non-autistic 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kid. This child should be treated with the same kid gloves as a 1 or 2-year-old, because they don't give a shit about COVID. And and that's not just COVID. Like there are other things in life, like, and it's on the parents we have to do some, we can't just be neglectful, right? But at the same time, believe me when I tell you, we're busting our fucking ass to do simple things like keep his shoes on at the zoo, and it's so, I think my point is that we have to, Autism Speaks gets a lot of bullshit because they focus on the parents. Fuck, dude. The parents have a lot to deal with. And there are other organizations that deal with the kids or the autistic people themselves. But we need to find a way as a society to accept these individuals and to continue to give them the tools to find what are the unique pieces of them that are far exceptional to us. Because I'm telling you right now, they're like the fucking X-Men.
Yep.
And it's they have every single one of them has an ability that is 1,000 times beyond any ability that you or I or anyone else listening to the show has. We just don't know what it is because they don't know, because they don't think to tell us that they're thinking in quantum equations and that the pizza to them looks like music. So, it's.
And I'll give you a break here. I'll give you a break here.
Make me cry. Oh my God.
I hate Dutch. I think everybody's pretty familiar with that fact. But
Dutch hates Dutch.
There's one thing I can say about Dutch is he's a good fucking dad.
Yeah.
And he's such a fucking condescending trash bag when he talks to me. And then his son will walk in before we go live. He's like, "Hey, buddy,
you never like your oldest son, and Mikey, you were my oldest." Okay.
Lord. There's a power struggle always. But it's the switch. Maybe that's what you're talking about. Is like when it finally happened to you and it's your family and it's your son, there's a switch in you and you hit that switch and you are like, I don't know, a cloud full of pillows. Like you turn so sweet for your baby boy. And the love and the relationship that you guys have, the few moments that do pop up, it's always very cute. It's always a little goofy. It's always you're like, come on, do something funny. And then your son's just like, yeah, fuck that. He's just like, no, I'm not doing that. And you just kind of, you just take it as it is. There's never any like, oh no, I told you to be quiet. You're just like, no. Hey man, what's going on? I said, you got your tablet. You need help? All right. Well, see you later. And then that's the conversation. And that's not lost on, I don't know if it's really happened any times that we're live, but it's not lost on your co-host. I saw Big House nodding there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's look, I don't need any sympathy. But like I think it's fair to say though, and I have a daughter who suffers from PTSD from a lot of issues that happened to her. My 20-year-old has PTSD. And a lot of what I've said about autism is also true of her.
Yeah.
You know, because people who have PTSD and have experienced trauma in their life that happened to them when they were a child is it's not their fault, but we tend to blame people as a society or look at like, well, what did you do wrong?
Right.
You know, and in both of these cases, and I'm sure, Amber, that there are people who, you know, have said stuff like that to you in some way, shape, or form. You know, like, what are you being punished for, et cetera, or something like that. Or that there are people in the LGBT community, the trans community, who, you know, believe that they're being punished for something because religion told them that they must have done something wrong, right? So it's bottom line is these are people.
I was a guilty Catholic growing up, right?
Oh,
so
boy.
And when you're a guilty Catholic, you know, you sin and you know, when I was really young, you know, listen, autism is like gender identity, right? There's the binary is 0 and 1, but in between those two numbers is an innumerable number of digits, right? To infinity, right? We can count numbers, decimal places to infinity between the two. And autism is the same way, because I have a lot of friends that I'm thankful to be blessed with that have autistic children, and I get to hang out with them quite a bit. And you know, it's not just the learning delays that they have or the difficulty communicating, or some of them don't like to be hugged, right? Social situations, avoiding them altogether. I mean, like screaming and running to your bedroom and slamming the door because there's going to be some people coming over for dinner that you're not familiar with.
Right.
You know, and a lot of these kids, like there's these two that I know, I don't want to say their names, but they had some pretty unusual interests that I thought was very interesting, that they were interested in these fringe interesting things that most people would find really like, why are you focused on this? But it showed a level of intelligence that a lot of people don't really, they take it for granted. They see someone that's autistic and maybe they know a little bit about it, where they know that, you know, the IQ levels are generally pretty low, and then, you know, in the teens someplace it's higher than 85 and blah blah blah, and they don't realize that within that whole IQ spectrum that there's other types of IQ. And to your point earlier, where they can focus on quantum mechanics or numbers, or they can see music and colors, right? But the biggest thing that I found with my interactions was their difficulty understanding emotions like we do, and the lack of empathy in society to understand that. And that happens amongst every group, not just autism, but every group. Until somebody has it happen to someone close to them, they just don't give a shit. And if it doesn't bother me, it's not in my bubble. And I feel for you.
It doesn't have. People don't care about things until it knocks on their door. Far too often in this society.
Yeah, and that's quite sad.
Yes.
And you know what? To Jason's point, where he said, you know, I wouldn't want to be born any other way. In some instances, I believe that as well about myself, because if I wasn't trans and didn't have to go through so much adversity, I may not have become the empathetic person that I am. I'm an empath. I take on other people's emotions. And when I walk into a room, I don't find all the positive things in the room. empaths are really attuned to finding all the negative things in a room first. And I can do that. And same thing with people that are autistic. They're able to do these things that we as a society in general just do not. In fact, when I worked for a university in New York, I hired as a technician somebody that was autistic, and they were actually, I hate this name. I don't know if it's actually still a name or not, but they called him an idiot savant, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that term.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just hated that term, and he even said, yeah, that's what they call me, blah blah blah. And this kid could remember.
Oh no.
We lost you now.
Nope, we lost Amber for a second there.
We'll
Get her.
Oh.
We'll get her. We'll get her back. Can you guys still hear everybody else?
I can hear you.
My mic sounds nice.
Check one.
Check one. Hello.
Oh, yep, there she is. We got her back. All right.
Wow.
Continue.
Back, still smelling crack in my clothes. Anyway.
I don't know what I was saying.
Well, the interest. So I think a couple things. Number one, all autistic people are not the same.
Right.
Some like some have learning disability that is, and again, it's a spectrum. So like, I might be on that spectrum. Everybody in this room might be on that spectrum because it's a spectrum, right? And so you might be at 0. Technically, you are on the spectrum because even if you're not autistic, you'd be a 0. But my son does not like sound. But he's okay with light. He loves flashing lights and like moving lights for the most part, as long as they're not too belligerent. But sound, he covers his ears. So he literally walks around with headphones on 80% of the time. Just like these, except they're like the sound dampening ones. But like he taught me what a narwhal was, which is a whale with a horn. I didn't know what that shit was till about 5 years ago. He's 5 years old. He taught me when he was about a year old. This is a narwhal or narwhal, whatever the fuck it's called. And like he's
RWHAL.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. But like the kid memorized every animal.
I did that.
And would go like at 15, 16 months, which is way before my other son, would say A, alligator, ape, apple, B, boy, bear, barracuda, C, cat, and then go through the entire alphabet and say these things, and like, and didn't just repeat the same thing every time. Would sometimes switch it up with different animals or words that would correspond with that letter. Right? He had the version with Craig Mack and Busta Rhymes.
Oh, that was produced by JD.
Yes. But like,
remix, baby.
But what I'm saying is, don't assume that if you know one autistic person that the other one's going to be exactly the same, right? So like one might hate sound, one might love sound, one might jump a lot, the other might be reserved. And like, I used to bring my son to church, and we had to go like 4 churches to find a church to know how to deal with him, because we would bring him to Awanas, and I hate like characterizing people like this, but like, they're like all staunch and orderly, and like they'd call us and complain, well, your son's not paying attention. No shit.
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care that you're in prayer right now. He wants the giraffe.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and well, maybe you should teach your son better, or maybe, and it's like, and like, look, this is one person. I'm not characterizing the entire world of Awanas because of one person.
Right.
However,
so
maybe you should talk to people in your leadership to say, hey, if you truly want to evangelize or teach or whatever the case may be, children, then you have a spectrum of children that will be in your show, and you should treat them like the individual children that they are, and not like a monolith. And, so it's, the main takeaway that I think you guys can take from this is that especially when you're communicating with an autistic child, and especially if you're ever in a situation where like you come up on a lost kid, or, you know, something in a grocery store or something. Because believe me, a lot of kids who wander from their parents now and in the past have been autistic and are autistic. And you ask them, where's your mom? Or, you know, whatever. Sometimes they'll just be more concerned with the red shirt that they see, and or they'll have to get to that animal, and mom's got 3 other kids or whatever, and she turns her toothpaste for 1 second. And so you can say to an autistic kid, and this works a lot of the time, is, you know, hi, you keep saying hi and like, hey, can I see your eyes? And you keep talking to them. Show me your eyes, please. These are my eyes. Can I see your eyes? My eyes. See, these are mine. Let me see your eyes. Hi. And then you say, first show me this, then let's do this. Or like if they want the red shirt, but you want to ask them their name. First show me your name, then the red shirt. And, you know, you can kind of scaffold these conversations around, you know, communicating with them. And again, what works for one doesn't work for all. I'm not, this is not a Band-Aid, but you know, it's a good way to try to scaffold it up, rather than, hey kid, I said, what's your name? You know, where's your mom? That sort of thing. And, you know, we just need to do a better job of identifying, especially if you're a teacher or a caregiver. You need to get your school district to put a plan in place to help benefit this particular child, not just here's what we do with every child. There needs to be an individual plan based on the needs assessment of each child to go after their specific plan or their specific need, a plan for their specific needs. And that is, and it's a lot of work. But anyway, there's my soapbox. So they're people.
Amber, before
I'm sorry. One other quick thing. Sorry. Kids with MS are oftentimes worse off, and we need to stop this bullshit. Because kids with autism generally, and people are going to think this sounds bad, but I don't give a fuck. Because people with autism generally look visually and aesthetically normal, where kids with MS, you can kind of tell that they have, you know, that they look a certain way, right?
Which MS?
Well, I don't want to use the word, the R word, but
are we talking Down syndrome or MS?
Yeah, Down syndrome. Yes, thank you. Down, not MS. I was thinking my grandmother has.
I was like multiple sclerosis.
No. I'm amalgamating my grandmother's MS with Down syndrome. Thank you. Okay. So, but what people would normally call the MR, right? But kids who have Downs, my sons have a cousin who has Downs, and you can tell physically that she has Downs, right? And those kids get a lot less love because people are afraid of the way that they fucking look. Those are the most loving fucking children in the fucking world. They are 1,000 times more loving than you or anyone you know. And we need to stop treating them like monsters.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm not taking anything away from them. I'm the same way. You know, it's you know, when you're battered and bruised, you know, and people don't understand you. And that's what it is with kids with Down syndrome, kids with autism. They're not very well understood. And sometimes a kid with autism will be, boy, that kid is very disruptive or disrespectful or whatever. And they won't stop and think that, you know, this world is diverse. And that goes back to the very beginning of our whole conversation when we talked about what's really taught in kindergarten. You know, diversity, inclusion. Part of diversity and inclusion was, and still hopefully still will be, to talk about kids with different disabilities and different needs, and telling kids it's okay. This child is going to be coming to our school this semester and they have a wheelchair to get around in, or this person can't hear, or this person has something that we call spectrum right? And in fact, I don't like the way they term them. I think psychologists have been shooting stuff out of their ass for the past 60 years because they got it all wrong with us. They got it all wrong with mental retardation, as we were saying that we don't want to call that. And they got it all wrong with, I'm trying to call them out for where they got it wrong, with even kids with Down syndrome and other issues out there. They sort of fly by the seat of their pants, and then you'll notice every 6 years they change their diagnoses. And I'm kind of sick of psychology. I'm very learned in psychology, and it really makes me angry to see them flip-flop on stuff so often, and because they're just so far behind the medical sciences holistically that it's pretty scary. And to your point, we as a society, we need to do a much better job at advocating and creating awareness. And awareness, for me, awareness should never be, and people that are trans or an LGBTQ are going to hate me for this, but I am sick and tired of our awareness being spread through pride parades where, the news channels will focus on the people with the most outrageous costumes, and they make us look like a caricature of a human being, rather than these are just people trying to say, I exist and here is who I am. Same thing with autism and all these other things. We need to advocate in a more realistic way. And I don't know what that way is going to be, other than to keep fostering these conversations like you just did, Jason, and the emotion that you just had that made me start crying, right? It's that type of interaction and empathy that happens organically when we have these types of conversations around issues that maybe aren't affecting everybody in the room. And I think more of them need to be had. So I'm really happy that you did this today.
Well, I appreciate it. And last touch here, autism goes diagnosed a lot more in communities of color.
Yeah.
And to economically disadvantaged individuals, because obviously they don't have
the resources.
Yeah, the resources to go, and we are super blessed to be able to afford let me give you an idea of the therapy that we have to go through. So Stephen needs 5 days a week of therapy for 2.5 hours a day. He should be getting 4. We just don't have the time for 4. He when he was younger, he would, and now he does get some at school because we're lucky enough to be in California where they have the programs in place. Shocker. Some states don't have that, right?
So it takes therapy before or after CRT?
Right. During. It's during CRT.
That is the therapy.
But you have to go through this therapy in home. So this means we can, and this isn't a sympathy story for me, but that means we can't go places because between 3 and 5:30 or 2:30 and 5 or whatever day it is,
right?
Because Easter Seals has to have someone in the house, an adult. So it hampers going to the store, that sort of stuff, and it's $25 copay every day.
Wow!
So that's $250 a week, every week. That's $1,000 a month, every month. It is literally a mortgage payment. And a lot of people cannot afford what I and Melissa can afford. And to be frank with you, we can't afford it either, to be really dreadfully honest with you.
No one has an extra $1,000 a month.
Yeah, Elon Musk apparently does, but
Elon, get back with us about that.
What bothers me is it's $250 copay a week, and yet people are idiots. They believe that this capitalist version of healthcare is actually working, and I just feel so bad because, these types of things should be covered. This is this person's life. It shouldn't be a matter of can you afford it or not, and then leave the disadvantaged out of the mix because they don't have the cash. I think that's That's where society
that's-
still
that's-
has it all wrong.
No, that's fair, right? Because I've earned this extra capital. I mean, other people had to lose out because of it, but hey, good for me.
Hey, you know, whatever.
I'm winning, so let's keep it going. And you
Yeah.
know what? I have enough money. Let's write some laws so that I can continue to win.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My kids can win.
My son plays on an autistic soccer team. There are kids on this team.
Hold on. What's your kid's record?
They don't keep score.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
What position he play?
Nor that's interesting. Again, we're talking about autistic soccer here. Nor do they care which goal they kick it into.
All right, I got $10 on your kids' team. What you got?
So
I got money on them. I got faith.
And half the time he personally is not that interested. He'll be interested for like 5 minutes and then he's picking grass. But that's most kids. But there are kids on this team who are not kids who play on the exact same team as he does. Like they're like 36 years old. And you know, and you know, you see the lifetime of wrinkles and saggy eyes in their parents.
Right.
And these people need help.
Mm.
You know, these people need help. And if you're a fucking asshole who thinks that we don't need healthcare in this country and that you should have to work for it, then you're a fucking monster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really, oh, well, you know, work harder. Yeah. Never thought of that. Thanks.
There's so many hardworking poor people that.
Have you ever tried not being poor?
Do you know how hard it is to be poor?
But
and how expensive that is.
Hard
so
work.
Expensive to be poor.
We use the word hard work for success.
Mm-hmm.
We also use it for freedom because the more poor you are, the less free you are. Mm-hmm. Because think about it. If you can't afford a car, you're not very free because you can't drive an hour away take your kids to the beach,
right,
or whatever it is. You know, you're not very free. So the less money you have, the less freedom you have. So there's a correlation between what we call freedom and wealth, or I should say financial wealth.
And Amber, on top of that, I went back in the show and I found out what you were talking about. You were talking about the autistic kid that you hired and that he was good with numbers, and then you garbled away.
Oh, yeah. His name was Hans, and he was brilliant. For computers, for example, which is what he dealt with, there's an IP address. So like what we're doing right now, each of our computers has an IP address.
He memorized IP addresses?
It could be like 199.29.201.43, right? And he could say, you could say, hey, you know, Rosemary's computer is on the fritz. Before we go check it out, which is a half a mile away from us, you know, do you know her IP number? And as soon as you said that, he would be saying, yeah, 199.29.203.23. And then he would say her MAC address is, and MAC addresses are hexadecimal, right, and they're very long. And he would name the MAC address. And I would, you know, I was the director of information technology. So I would go into my tool and I would look for these numbers, and he was spot on for every one of them, you know, and yet the same kid would get a whole supply of computers for the entire computer lab and he would unbox them at night, set up the entire lab while we're all asleep. He would stay there all night, right? And we never really understood why, but that was the reason why. Once he starts something, he can't stop.
Right.
Yeah.
And he would set up the whole entire lab, and the next morning we'd get there and we'd say, Hans, we love you, but you need to stop doing this. You're making us all look bad, you know?
Hey, yo, chill, Hans, chill.
But he was so, you know, he was so regimented, but at the same time, he would have 3 to 4 weeks of Chinese food half eaten under his desk.
Oh,
right? Because he didn't know how to take care of himself. So what I started to do is making him dinner every night. And I would bring containers. I would let him eat it. Then I would make sure he gave me the containers back so I could go wash them. And I would make him dinner for about a whole year. I was making him dinner every night because he didn't know how to do it himself. And his parents were less than desirable and wanted him to live on his own.
Right.
And he wasn't capable of doing that, to be fair.
Right.
I loved him, but he was not capable of it.
And maybe we'll do this as like a Patreon thing. Boy, the stories I can tell you guys, because it is now out there in the wilderness. I quit my job at the grocery store. So I've been working groceries since I was a teenager. And unfortunately, a lot of parents with special needs kids, especially kids on the spectrum, they would just drop them off. Just drop them off, and then I'm supposed to just figure it out. And I was a front end manager or assistant front end manager, and I was in charge of all the checkers and baggers and making sure everything ran smoothly, breaks, lunches, all that good stuff. Make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. So when you drop off a kid who's kind of verbal,
Right,
and or a girl who, if you tell her something's in the wrong spot, she'll have a meltdown. Or, you know what I mean? Like, they don't tell you all of this stuff. And the parents never told us any of this stuff. It was just, unfortunately for some of the kids, I wasn't the only manager there. The other manager wasn't quite as adept at noticing the differences in people and noticing the intricacies of each individual kid that we would have come in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, you cannot yell at her. No,
Right,
I wasn't yelling. I was just saying, I'm like, you don't understand.
you don't even understand.
You're yelling at her right now. Like, you literally just told her she's not supposed to be over here. She's supposed to be over there. That is the absolute worst thing you could have said to her.
Yeah. And that's for people with PTSD also.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times we think, interesting point, my son will line up his animal toys, right? He's got a million fucking animal figurines. And he's got stuffed animals that are animals. He loves animals. And he'll start at the front door and line them up across the house from size. So from his smallest little toy duck to his big like elephant stuffed animal. And by the way, don't mix a dinosaur in there because those are not animals. But he will line them up. And once I looked at it and I noticed the line was curving like this. So I went and I straightened them out for him. So I was like, oh, straighten them out. He freaked out and moved them back because to him, the curve was part of the art, is what I figured out. And so what I saw as, oh, look, your line's drifting,
Right,
was to him part of what he was creating.
Right.
Interesting.
So again, that's not true for everyone, but that being said, I think we have one last segment. Amber, if you do, we're going to do our cigars portion now.
I'm going to drop off.
Yeah,
I appreciate your cigars and whatnot, but
I would like to drop off for the cigar part too.
It's next week for me already. It's 2:12 a.m. So I'm going to.
this is for him, Amber. Okay.
Hold on. There you go.
There. Oh, there it is.
Amber, one more time, if you would, where can people find your book?
Amazon.com or at amberrosewashington.com.
And the name of the book is?
The name of the book is Hiding from Myself.
All right. We will talk to you very soon. We got business to talk about.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We got business.
I'll try to be more alert. It's this West Coast, East Coast stuff is difficult sometimes. So
hey, we love you, sister.
Thank you so much.
I'll be more coherent. All right, you guys take care and have a good cigar thingy. All right, bye.
Amber.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, she's gone. Let's talk about her.